now we proceed to the second speaker. Let me just call on Ericsson. Hold on. Let me see if I can.
Hi, hello there.
Sorry, I'll just close the PowerPoint. There, yeah. Now we can see you. Welcome, Father Ericsson, to the conference.
Thank you.
I have made you co-host so you can share your screen.
Okay, so
Let me just pin you. I'll- you can start sharing.
I already did, but it disappeared.
Okay. Yeah, maybe you can stop screen share and then reshare.
Close this first, and then I'll do it again. It's not here anymore. Let me find it again. It's gone. Where is it? Where did it go? Okay. I'll do it now. Oh, it was closed. I'll open it again first.
There, we can see it.
Okay. Should I proceed now?
Yes.
Okay. So good afternoon, everyone. Greetings from Valladolid. First, I would like to thank the organizers, Miss Christina Lee and Miss Maria Cristina Juan, for allowing me to participate in this conference. I'm sorry I couldn't be there since my visa hasn't arrived. And well, one of the many things we learned during this pandemic is to use different platforms to continue our academic endeavors. So my paper for this conference is about the role on the experience of the Augustinian friars during the British invasion, as recounted by our brother Fray Agustin Maria Castro, the librarian of the San Agustin Intramuros at that time. So let me start. But first, briefly, allow me to share, to introduce to you the Augustinians in general and their missions in the Philippines. So the Augustinians, being the first religious order to arrive in the Philippines, has witnessed almost its entire history from 1565 and the making of the Philippines as a nation until today. They have been part of the lives of the Filipinos since the foundation of their towns, beginning of religious formation and civic reorganization. They were also present in the times of disasters, wars, and even religious struggles. The British invasion in the Philippines in 1762, however, made a huge impact in the history of the lives of the Augustinians in the Philippines, since that was the first time that they were expelled from their provincial house since they arrived in 1565. And many of its treasures and heritage were lost during this time and were never recovered. So this 2-year struggle was recorded just a few years later by Fray Agustin Maria Castro, again, who was the librarian of the convent at that time. So let's proceed with who are the Augustinians in the Philippines. So again, they were the first missionaries to arrive in the Philippines together with Miguel Lopez de Legazpi. They came to the country in 1565, 44 years after Ferdinand Magellan was killed in Cebu. Being the chaplains of the fleet and during the first years of conquest, the Augustinians were given the responsibilities as custodians of many religious artifacts, such as the image of the Santo Niño, the Cebu, and the Ichiomo. They were also instructed to build church, to house the Santo Niño and a convent next to it. It is where today we find the church and the convent of Santo Niño near the Magellan's Cross. The Augustinians were the sole group of missionaries working in the Philippines until the arrival of the Franciscans in 1578, the Jesuits in 1581, the Dominicans in 1587, and the Recollects in 1606. Then among the religious orders, the Augustinians had also received the largest and most lucrative mission areas even after the territorial partition in 1594. One of the most important convents they built was the San Agustin, or the convent of San Pablo in Intramuros. Yesterday, I was listening to your discussions, and maybe you were wondering why sometimes it bears the name San Pablo, sometimes San Agustin. Actually, because the church or the convent is named, they name it after San Agustin, but the San Pablo is the patron of the church or of the convent, of the missionaries being the apostle to the Gentiles. So they have Saint Paul as their patron. You know? And actually, the Church of San Agustin also housed as a parish. Since there was a time when they moved the parish from the cathedral to the San Agustin. So that's why it has also the Our Lady of Consolation as the patron of the parish of San Agustin. So it's a little bit complicated, but if you're going to look at how it arrived in that particular thing, it's easy to understand. So it was built to house several friars in charge of the provincial administration and to those who arrived for the mission. The convent was well equipped and satisfactory enough for the formation of candidates. Though the convent became a depository of different important materials accumulated and brought by the friars, like documents, books, gold, silver, ivory, and other important artifacts. The friars survived through the income they earned through their modest works, aside from the donations of people gave them or the collections they received in the administration of sacraments. Thus, even on occasions like war and calamities, although they suffered losses, they endured as they managed their resources prudently. Since their arrival in the Philippines, they have been involved in the pacifications as well as in trying to defend the rights of the natives against abuses committed by the conquistadores. The attack in Manila by the Chinese, Limahong in 1574, left the San Agustin Church and convent burning. Guido Labizares carried out an offensive and brought with him some friars as chaplains. They were also requested by the same authority to contain the rebellion by the Manila residents in 1600s. And the same year, when the Dutch attempted an attack, the Augustinians served as chaplains of the troops. There were 4 Augustinian friars who participated in the battle against the Chinese during the revolt in 1639. And these priests voluntarily recruited Filipinos from their respective parishes. While the rest of the friars in Manila played the role by supplying food to the troops, the same group of friars also contributed to the construction and fortification of the walls in the Manila Bay. Well, worthy to mention, when talking about wars and guns and the friars, the first decree on guns and armaments in the Philippines came out in 1586, which was understood to be in consonant with the prohibition contained in our Constitution of the Order of St. Augustine. Nevertheless, considering that the archipelago, the Philippines, was a campo or tierra de guerra, the religious were allowed to carry guns. So in 1601, the chapter still supported the license given to the friars to carry guns, but it remained them not to make it known to the public, not to have many of them, and not to use them even in a friendly fire. So now let's talk about Fray Agustin Maria Castro. Many friars who arrived in the Philippines were men of holiness, honor, and commitment, and even intelligence, and many of them immersed themselves in prayer, service, and studies. Although they devoted much of their time to the science of the divine, they also produced works of great categories in the field of arts and humanities, worthy of human recognition. Among those who labor in such area was Fray Agustin Maria Castro. When he was still about to finish his studies in philosophy and theology in the convent of San Agustin, Fray Castro had his exposure to the provincial archive and library, doing his research primarily on the matters of history of the Augustinians in the Philippines. Just after he was ordained, he was immediately appointed as the librarian of the said convent, which he received with much enthusiasm as he found opportunity to gather more data and notes for his historical research. Fray Castro was in the convent of Intramuros when the English squadron called for the relinquishment of the city in January 1762. Together with other Augustinians who escaped and resisted the British forces, they manifested their loyalty to the Spanish crown and refused to surrender. While retreating to the provinces north of Manila, Castro witnessed the contributions of his fellow Augustinians supporting Governor Simon de Anda. After the war in 1565, Fray Castro returned to the convent of San Agustin only to find out that it was plundered twice by the British soldiers. The library, which was very familiar, he was very familiar with, was viciously robbed, and which was almost left. Since there was nothing he could do in relation to his work, and due to the lack of peace at that time in the provinces, he was transferred to various assignments. In 1764, he was first sent to Iloilo. Then in 1768 to Cebu. He was also sent to Leyte, Samar, and the island of Mactan. In 1770, he was sent back to Manila, where he reorganized the library with materials he gathered from the previous provincial assignments. From this occasion, he started to write the Osario Venerable, the one you see on screen, a biography of the Augustinian missionaries in the Philippines and their missionary endeavors. He was assigned to other parishes in Batangas, Laguna, Pampanga, and Ilocos until 1778 before he came back to Manila, which he continued writing Osario Venerable and the Historia del Convento San Agustin or San Pablo. And then, as Father Manuel Blanco indicated in his Tabla de Defuntos, Fray Castro died blind in Manila on December 31, 1801. So these pages are simply part of the Osario Venerable. Now the Augustinians and the British soldiers, the news about the war between Spain and England in January 1761 came slowly to the Philippines, and it started as a rumor, although it started to appear often in some personal correspondence and letters. Here we see the friars having reliable and good source of intelligence. Among the Augustinian friars, Fray Jose Cuadrado received a letter which he was told about the declaration of war between Spain and England. Fray Agustin Maria Castro writes, I quote, "I saw a letter dated in Seville, which a neighbor of that city wrote to his son, minister in Ilocos, Sarat, called Fray Jose Cuadrado, which one he saw and read about the declaration of war, sent it to Bishop Fray Bernardo Ostariz, Bishop of Nueva Segovia, and the latter forwarded it to Señor Gobernador Rojo, who did not mind it, saying that it was purely friar stories." So on September 14, as we all know, that the British soldiers showed up in Manila Bay, asking the city to be surrendered. According to Castro, the reason for its surrender was due to the inadequacies and ignorance of the state officials and the bad health of the Archbishop, at the same time the governor. During the siege, the religious orders and the secular clergy cooperated in various ways to defend Manila. In contrast, the Augustinians maintained their loyalty to the crown of Spain. The Augustinian provincial superior at the time, Fray Pedro Espinera, warned then the auditor Simon de Anda of the obsessions of the British to persecute the religious, to seize the properties of the San Agustin convent and the nearby provinces because of their unwavering loyalty to Spain and the resistance to the British forces. Again, the reasons for the resistance was their fear of the obsessions of the British forces to persecute the religious, and then the British forces will seize their properties. The third one is actually the British invasion as a threat to the Christian faith. So the first two reasons of their resistance, at the same time, the consequence eventually happened. There are several documents I've read that would give us a picture of what happened. Literal testimony of the petition of Fray Manuel Rebollo, Procurador of San Agustin Convent of the city of Manila before the commissaries, designed by the superior government of these islands for the purpose taking information from the witness regarding the British declarations of the Augustinians as traitors to both majesties, Catholic and British, seizing the properties of gold, silver, personal property, and furniture belonging to the monastery of San Pablo or San Agustin of the Cassiated Augustinians. And then another set of documents manifest the courage of the Augustinian friars and the threat brought by their decisions not to bow down to the British forces. it says that he knows for sure that a decree was issued by the governor and British Council to publicly condemn the cautiated religious of the Order of St. Augustine as traitors on the grounds of their loyalty to the Catholic Majesty and for opposing the seizing of the provinces, as they were much intent in doing, an operation to which was very opposed the almost illustrious Don Simon de Anda y Salazar, whose wishes the religious favored with all their power. For this reason, and due to their zealous dedication to the common good and the king, some religious of the monastery and others they could lay their hands on and were apprehended. Furthermore, they treated as public malefactors, as they tried to persuade them not to oppose their war plans. This strange conduct of civilized people, the British shocked the population. Furthermore, they offered reward to anyone delivering to them Reverend Father Remigio Hernandez, Prior of Bulacan, and Reverend Father Martin de Aguirre, former provincial Prior of Malolos. The witness knows likewise that they embarked the said religious, the above order, and led them to prison, no one knowing until now. From official sources, their faith and their intention of the British was to exterminate the said religious order in these islands, due to the fact that in the provinces of their administration, they refused to acknowledge another king than His Catholic Majesty, and furthermore persuaded and effortlessly the natives to do the same, as in truth, they have really done, keeping the name of the king in all their acts, suffering on account of these persecutions, death, and loss of their properties. So aside from the several friars who died due to unsustained support to Governor Anda, so I guess we've heard that also Filipinos, by just simply bringing themselves only with spears, arrows, and machete, as recounted by Castro. Again, the resistance. The Augustinian provincial Father Remigio Hernandez issued a decree to all religious Augustinian parish priests asking them to convince their parishioners to acknowledge and heed Simon de Anda as the Governor General of the islands. So the people of Bulacan and Pampanga, who valiantly answered the call, fought fearlessly against the British forces. The resistance camped in Bulacan using the monastery as their headquarters. Although the British made a blockade of supply from Manila, the Augustinians, who had control of the sea route, maintained the supply coming from the Visayas, especially from Iloilo, Panay, and Cebu. At the beginning of the war, many of the friars already served as guards, just like any soldiers. They believed that during the war, as such, their first responsibility was to take up arms and defend the walls of the city. One of the most complete examples of the role was the friars that was Fray Juan Facundo Acosta, who came to the Philippines as captain of engineers of Marquess of Obando. He joined the Augustinians on June 12, 1752, and was instrumental in the resistance by spearheading the making of cannons, bombs, and mortars, and all sorts of military equipments. The rest of the parish priests were in charge of the recruitment of Filipino natives to recognize Simon de Anda. After another meeting or another attempt, during the meeting of Alcoraz with the Archbishop of Manila discussing the total surrender of the Philippines to the British, the Augustinian provincial maintained his position never to yield to the invading forces, as he considered it dangerous to the peace and people of the Philippines. Consequently, the convent of Manila suffered a tremendous loss. Again now, Castro would narrate, the British put up public action, the San Agustin Monastery with all its properties like the gold and silver of the church, the money from donations, and the deposit coming from the monasteries and churches of the Augustinian provinces, choir stalls, paintings, and engravings from the sacristy, bells from the belfry, infirmary, and storeroom furniture. Furthermore, they imprisoned the religious, taking some of them to Bombay and then to London, leaving others as ransom in Goa, the vigilance of Senor Biso del Rey, who requested it. Fray Castro continues to narrate that both monastery and the church were sacked and sequestered and finally brought to public auction on November 3, 1762. They found some 90 bags of money belonging to pious associations, the order, and some Manila citizens. Much less was found inside the monastery private rooms. On the next day, the soldiers searched the library, stealing all valuable collections and selling them to a Chinese mestizo, lawyer and resident of Manila, Santiago Orendain, which also sold them little by little. What happened in the convent of San Agustin in Intramuros was the same in other Augustinian convents like in Pasig, Malate, and Guadalupe.
Ericsson.
Yes.
You have 2 minutes to
Yeah,
wrap up.
sorry. I'm almost there.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Still by Fray Castro, I would like just to compare what really happened in. So this is how he would evaluate Fray Castro with what was lost in the library and convent of San Agustin. He says, I doubt if there's anything in the Philippines similar to the library that this convent had in the upper cloister. I was a librarian of the Custodian in 1760, and so I will say clearly that plainly what I have seen. It was a big room, bright and beautiful, had 20 shelves and fine exquisite wood called Nara. I guess I would just leave it here because Fray Castro described it venerably. You could read it in his works. Another important thing I would like you to see is this one. These are the list of books. I just got 10 just for you to see, the written by the friars that appear in biographical works and corpus, but we couldn't find them anymore here in our archive nor in our library here in Valladolid. For the information of everybody, there were 2 possessions wherein most of the materials in the convent of San Agustin were transferred here in our convent in Valladolid. So that was in 1898, before the revolution of 1898, and then and before the World War II, I guess exactly in the year 1935, another concession of materials were brought here in the convent to save those things. So in conclusion, so I would like to affirm that the early Augustinians in the Philippines, just like Agustin Maria Castro, were more than just missionaries. They were more than just bearers of the cross and the faith. They wore several uniforms and they assumed several roles, not just anymore as chaplains, but as well as being recruiters, provision providers, and being combatant soldiers. Amid many difficulties and challenges like war times, their enduring spirit reveals that they fought side by side with the natives and remained loyal to the crown to whom they pledged their allegiance. Since the first years of their Spanish conquest, the friars were already at the front line, not only in the propagation of the faith, but also in defending what they believe was rightfully under their protection. Thank you. Sorry for being fast.
Thank you very much, Ericsson.